The pricing of everything in the developer world is broken. Just to start it off, I want to make it clear that we can collectively blame AWS for everything that I'm about to say in this video. Just before I get into the real crux of the issue, I want you to hear me out because something good is happening. And I believe the AI companies are some of the last ethical ones left when it comes to pricing transparency. They are a dying breed, I must say. So nowadays, services like databases, servers, and object storage have quirky pricing that I believe is entirely created with the intention of making it a lot less clearer just how much things cost. This wishy-washy pricing is hidden behind 4 words: pay as you go. Nothing good comes after pay as you go, because it's not even real pay as you go. It's something else, something I do not recognize. Chief amongst them being that the worst offenders are transactional email and identity providers. Right now, I genuinely challenge you to think of how much sending 100,000 emails on MailJet, Brevo, or Postmark costs. I'll wait. The truth is, nothing about their pricing is clear. And on top of it all, you still have add-ons like dedicated IP addresses, and they do this deliberately. The cheaper the tier, the more add-ons you need, but the tiers don't have hard limits, so even a cheaper tier can get really expensive as the usage compounds. Some of these services like to blast it everywhere on their website that their products are significantly cheaper. They do this to get you excited enough about the information on the website for you to peruse, to stall you and make you fall in love with it before you make way to the pricing page. I think it's unethical because, the pricing page is where the real pricing is hidden. You see, maybe I'm old school in this regard, but I'm genuinely not a fan of getting tricked. The whole thing puts me off on a service. I'm not a psychologist, but the misrepresentation of pricing began way before you and I were born. Something that today seems, innocent, where they remove 1 cent from a pricing of a product. Something that costs $100 is represented as costing $99. Genuinely, it seems like an innocent mistake or a rounding error, but it's not. The $99 looks significantly cheaper in my mind, and I'm likely to round it off to the nearest lower whole 10. So in my head, and many other people's heads, by the way, I must say, the $99 becomes $90. So even when I recommend a product to friends, I'm likely to just say, well, it costs $90. And the word of mouth spreads with this understated pricing. And I suppose most of us have accepted that this is just how pricing works. Well, evidently, the misrepresentation has gotten significantly worse. Nothing is what it seems anymore. Now they don't even want us to think about the pricing anymore. I'm going to throw this at you. Do you know how much it costs to use the famous AWS EC2? Personally, I don't know. I've been a developer for quite some time, and I have had my fair share of run-ins with EC2, but the pricing remains a black box to me. And I'm convinced that the CEO of AWS, Matt Garman, cannot tell you how much it costs without serious prep from the communications departments, obviously. So just as an experiment, if you're in America and you frequent the same places as Matt, ask him for us and come back to the comment section to tell us how it went. You see, for me, pay as you go is simpler. You pay for what you use, and if you don't use, you don't pay. Pay as you go is even more perfectly suited for prepaid, where I buy credit to use a service and those credits remain intact if I don't use the service. This is quite straightforward for me. For me, it's like the payphone. You put money into the payphone, you get the ability to make a call, which could last for as long as the money hasn't run out yet. And if the money starts to run out, you can put more coins into the payphone and your call will be extended, right? It's simple. Pay as you go. There is zero complexity here. If stopping the usage of a service would have adverse effects on its intended purpose, it cannot under any circumstance be considered pay as you go. Like imagine if you had to use the payphone for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Like you couldn't stop. If you put it down, something horrible happens to you. In this nightmare scenario, the telecoms companies would be disingenuous to sell you a pay-as-you-go phone. It would be expensive, obviously, because you would always have to be on the phone and you would max out the monthly usage, or else something happens to you. You see where I'm going with this? Well, the initial idea for this video came from my frustration with the pricing of SurrealDB Cloud. Basically, SurrealDB is a fairly new multimodal database you can use as a graph database, document or relational database, or even mix them up all at once. The thing is, I actually like it. No, scratch that. I love it. It's been my database for the past 2 years. For the most part, I was self-hosting it. They launched the managed cloud service for the database in January of 2025. And I was looking forward to it. You know, the truth is, I'm fed up with self-hosting. I actually wrote a newsletter about this where I tell you why I don't want to self-host anymore. I'll put the link somewhere in this video, or in the description down below. But back to SurrealDB Cloud. When I saw their pricing, I was taken aback. I won't lie. You know, this is not because it's expensive or anything. It is expensive, but I suppose they have to make money, and that's perfectly fine, right? What is not perfectly fine is the way their pricing is structured. It is unnecessarily granular, I must say. It takes from the pricing of AWS, and that's because under the hood, SurrealDB Cloud runs on the AWS infrastructure. And I think it's fine that it runs on AWS because many services run on AWS. Again, what is not fine is them not abstracting away the complex, meaningless AWS pricing away from me, the end user. You see, I think charging for compute hours is fine. But what is not fine is having the compute hour pricing plastered all over the marketing of the service. One level above their free tier, the cheapest tier is said to be 12 cents per hour. Now, the number makes 0 sense at first glance, and that's because it requires work from you and I. From the top of my head, I couldn't possibly tell you what 21 cents per hour will be at the end of the month. I have to take out a calculator to do the work. The crazy thing is, it actually calculates to about $15 per month. An actual number that actually makes sense. And the question is, why don't they just put this $15 per month on their website in big fonts? Well, that's because it's not really $15. That's not a real price. The real price is granular and scalable. They pride themselves in this. The sky is the limit. They are charging more on top of the $15 per month of compute. They are charging for network traffic and storage. But still, it doesn't make sense to put down the hourly rate of the compute because, well, supposedly at no point in a month will you take down the instance to save cost, because the database must be up at all times. Yes, sometimes you are fed up with the service and you want to terminate it before the month end, and SurrealDB would argue that, well, in that case, instead of charging you the whole $15, they would charge you for the usage up to the hour you cancel, which I believe is an issue for accountants, not you and I. If anything, the $15 should be front and center and have some fine print at the end, or at the bottom rather, explaining the granularity of the pricing. What I'm suggesting here is nothing groundbreaking. It's been done before. During my self-hosting days, I used to use Hetzner for all my computing needs. Their pricing is exactly what I think SurrealDB should adopt, at the very least, obviously. Look, it's not perfect, but it makes sense. A €7 VPS is €7. Behind the scenes, Hetzner would have a mechanism to count the number of hours the VPS has been up to calculate the usage cost. With this, I can rest assured that if I cancel my VPS, I won't be charged the full cost. But you see, I don't need a calculator to calculate before I order a VPS. This is why I regard Hasna as a company with a real integrity. Very few such companies exist today. Most certainly, they don't exist in the authentication identity provider world. I consider the pricing of identity providers to be exquisitely depraved, I must say. They have a treasure trove of hidden costs. Again, back in my self-hosting days, there was a time that I was looking for a simple drop-in authentication for my apps. I didn't want to build it myself because it's the kind of thing that is boring, and I'm of the belief that it's unproductive to build something that is already solved by the market. I went on a search and I found that there's a lot of open source authentication providers out there, except they're only open source by name. You can't really self-host them. They are too technically complex. I was forced to try their managed services, obviously, in this regard. That's what they want you to do. They make it so complicated that you have to just relent and use their managed service. And unfortunately, I ran into the issue that most of these are priced in a very obfuscatory manner. Usually the pricing tiers have a pricing floor that comes included with just enough perks. But then, when you need more, you pay for additional usage. The thing about these things is that they don't stop at additional usage. There's more, there's add-ons. Sometimes they have some of the pettiest add-ons on there. I remember there was an identity provider where blocking users was an add-on, a paid add-on. The whole ordeal for me made me question it all. I figured it was actually far more palatable for me to just roll my own authentication. And like I said, the standards are in the gutter, right? However, I must say that, all hope is not lost, because I believe AI companies are going to save us all, because their pricing tiers is something more transparent I have ever seen of late. It's truly remarkable, I must say. I remember one time I wanted to use DeepSeek for experimenting with vibe coding, and I basically had to buy credits, load them onto DeepSeek before I could use their API. That for me is quintessentially pay as you go, and better yet, with a bit of prepaid functionality. I found out that this type of API usage pricing is far more common in the AI world. For an industry known for its predatory practices, I must say that, they sure are committed to transparent pricing. What you pay is what you get with these companies. No shenanigans. The better part is that their products are not 24/7, unlike the compute companies like Serial DB Cloud. So life can move on without you actually calling the cloud API, but life cannot go on without my database.